Hello, lawn mowing people. Now, what I'm going to talk about today is how much does it cost to run a lawn mowing business? Now, as you probably know, there's really no straightforward answer to this question, and there's going to be a lot of variables such as the size of the business or even the type of business that you run. And even the country you can work in will make a difference. And even the country you live in will make a difference because there's different growing seasons and some places get snow and some places don't. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a real-time example. And the best way is to give the actual running percentages of a real-life test case. So I took the figures from our business in a financial year, and I've gone through and I've broken them down and I'll talk about them here. So remember, this is by no means the be-all end-all, but it should give you a good idea where to start when looking at your own figures. And I need you to consider some things first before you look at these figures. Now, this business is mature, so it's been going for a fair while, so it hasn't got a lot in the way of vehicle loans or anything like that. My wife and I, we're both 60 and we run this business for 20 hours a week. Another thing is we only mow small lawns. We don't do any of the big stuff. Another thing is that we cover an area that's roughly 13 kilometres long and about 7 kilometres wide. So we cover a reasonable size area, but not that big. And the turnover for our little business last year was about 120K. Now, another thing is that we're based in New Zealand and we have no employees. And this is the operating expenses for the year ending 2021. Here we'll talk about each area of expenditure and the percentage of income. So we'll start off with ACC. Now for us it was about 1.23% of our income, and this is a necessary evil. You've got to use it to cover yourself in case you have an accident or anything like that happens. Here in New Zealand, the ACC is compulsory and it's managed by the government. Now, another thing is for an accountant, you'll need to pay for one of them. We spend less than 0.25% of our income on this. Now, one of the reasons that we do that is we actually do a lot of our own accounts and we just send them to an accountant to get finalisation. But if you're actually paying someone to do your accounts, you probably end up spending about $1,000 a year on it. There's services in New Zealand and Australia that'll do this for you. Places like Henry, that's about HNRY, and they'll do this automatically for you, and they'll only charge you 1% of your turnover, which is a pretty good deal really when you're starting a business and if you're going to be operating as a sole trader. Now, another thing is advertising. We spend less than 1.5% of our turnover on advertising, but this is because we're a mature business. If you're a new business, I'd suggest that you spend at least 5% of your turnover on advertising, or if you want to be really aggressive about it, you could go as high as 10. I'd never go below 1% because you cannot rely 100% on organic traffic no matter how long you've been in business. And another thing is bank fees. We spend less than 0.25% of our income on bank fees. And I suggest that you shop around for a good deal when it comes to banks because fees can be a killer. When we remortgaged our house and we changed banks, we found that the new bank that we had charged a huge amount of money in fees. They charged us for every deposit, and because we were getting anything up to about 15 deposits a day, we were getting charged a lot of fees. And so we ended up separating the accounts using our old business account with the other bank for our deposits, and we just transfer them over once a week in order to save paying all those fees. So when you're looking at banks, do see how much they charge you per deposit because it can make a difference if you have a business like a lawn mowing business where you're getting tons of little deposits all of the time. Now, another thing is drawings. I suggest that when you start a business, you aim at paying yourself about 50% of the turnover because that allows you to save some money in your business and even pay your personal tax and things like that. That year, we actually paid ourselves 65% of turnover, and we're pretty happy with that figure. That's about where I think you should be. And also, we've got a partnership. So my wife and I own the business 50-50, and we split the income 50-50, which of course reduces our tax bill a bit too. Now, I also suggest that when you start, as I said, pay yourself 50% of turnover and pay yourself once a week on a Friday to keep it simple. Don't go using the business card to stop and get petrol for your lawn mowing vehicle and then go and get a couple of pies as well. This makes your transactions super hard to evaluate, and it's going to cost you a lot more at the end of the year to get your accountant to separate out all those little payments that you made for yourself. There could also be some legal liabilities if you're running a limited liability company and you're using the company card like a personal bank. So pay yourself once a week. Don't do a lot of little payments and pay yourself on a piecemeal basis. Another option, if you want to be safe for tax, would be when you pay yourself 50% of the turnover, transfer another 10% into a separate account that's connected to your bank account and keep that there to pay your taxes when the time's due. Now, another thing that we have is dump fees. Now, we spent less than 0.5% of our turnover on dump fees in that year. And that's because we actually have a personal dump as well as having a paid dump. So you may be spending a lot more, or you may be spending a lot less if you have your own dump. And it also depends on your business model. If you're catching grass, then you're going to be paying dump fees. If you're mulching grass, then you have no dump fees. So that also comes into it. Another thing is mower repairs and equipment. We spend 3% of our income on that. And we run a few mowers, and we normally replace a mower and maybe a small piece of equipment every year. And there's also repairs and accessories such as weed eater cord, spark plugs, filters, and two-stroke oil that you're going to be getting all of the time. And then there's fuel. Fuel is a huge cost for a lawn mowing business, and in that year we spent 6.5% of our turnover on fuel. It was one of our highest costs. And do remember that we cover an area that's 13 kilometres long by 7 kilometres wide, and we run 2 vehicles. So your costs may differ if you have a different setup. And we find the most effective way to reduce this cost is to sell or swap lawns on the peripherals of our area. And this reduces travel costs, and it will also cut fuel costs and increase your profit at the same time. So it's a good thing to do. And then there's GST. Now, GST in New Zealand is 15%, but that doesn't mean that you're actually collecting 15% for the government. It actually works out at closer to 9% by the time you take out your expenses for a lawn mowing business. Now, the GST we paid that year worked out at 8.96%, so just under 9%. Now, this is called GST in New Zealand. In other countries, it may be called a sales tax or a regional tax or something like that. Here in New Zealand, you must register for GST once you start getting close to the threshold of 60k. One thing many people don't realise is that it's all about intent before you hit the threshold. So this is what IRD have to say about that. Whether you're a sole trader, a contractor in a partnership or a company, as soon as you think that you'll earn more than $60,000 in 12 months, you must register for GST. You may be charged penalties if you don't register when you need to. So reading that, my advice is that it is all about intent. If you start a business and you intend to become absolutely huge, then you need to register for day one. What I'd suggest is that when you start a business, you intend to get your turnover up to $1,000 a week, because then you're going to know whether this business is successful and whether you want to continue with this business. And once you hit that goal and you've turned over 50,000 in a year, then yes, go and register for GST. Many people make the mistake of registering when they start their business because they want to claim the money back on equipment. But this is actually going to cost you money in the long run unless you're spending a massive amount on equipment. Because, for instance, if you're spending 25k on setup and claim a GST refund, you'll get about 3.2k back. And the amount of GST that you'll pay when you finally hit the threshold is about 5.5k. So you do the sums on that one. As I said, it depends on intent. Now, the next thing is insurance. Now, insurance, yeah, it's a fairly big cost. It's more than you would expect. We spent just over 3.25% on insurance. And this is general insurance, so it covers things like public liability, equipment, and damage or anything like that. And also make sure that you read your policy carefully. And if you can, try and get free window replacement on your vehicle policy, because that can really come in handy. I've broken a few windows in the past year or so, and it's saved me a huge amount of money. I don't normally break that many windows, but it's been quite a bad run for that. So it might save you spending $1,000 on getting a tinted window replaced when you could have been covered for it. And another thing that you've got to look at is your phone. Now, the phone doesn't cost a lot of money. We basically spend less than 1% of our income on our phone. Now, when you have a phone for your business, always make sure that you answer your phone, because you'll be amazed how many contractors don't answer their phone. And if you answer your phone, your chances of building your business quicker have just doubled. We get a lot of quotes because I wear a headset underneath my earmuffs, and I can hear when the phone rings, and I take calls immediately. I stop what I'm doing, I take the quote, and then I organise to get it done, or for another contractor to go around there. You don't want to leave these calls on the table. You don't want to ignore your phone and then have customers go and ring someone else and get them round. Now, another thing is safety equipment. We spend less than 1/3% on safety equipment, and this is things like boots, earmuffs, safety glasses, etc. Then you've got admin. Now, we spend just over 0.5% of our turnover on admin, and this covers things like printing, subscriptions, power, and software. And then you've got plant and finance. Now, basically, we spend less than 0.5% on finance in that financial year, but do remember we were in the tail end of our vehicle finance. If you're paying off a vehicle, you'll probably find that you're paying off that vehicle at about $100 a week. So you'll be spending about $5,000 a year on that. Another thing is vehicle costs, and this is things like repairs, recharges, warrant of fitness, and things like that. We spent about 1.5% of our turnover on vehicle costs. So that gives you an idea of how much you need to put aside there. I've always aimed to try and keep my total operating costs at under 40% of turnover. This is good because this means you can run a lean, efficient business, and it allows you to keep 60% of the turnover for yourself. So I hope this information helps with your lawn mowing journey. If you want more help, you can always join the membership. You'll find a link in the first comment below. Meanwhile, get out there, mow lawns, have fun, and happy lawn mowing, people.